Although the NES was the first system I ever owned, the first brand new system I ever got was a Sega Genesis. And growing up in the 90s, I was definitely a Sega fan. I loved Sega, they could do no wrong in my eyes. And the Genesis was just an awesome system. I loved Sonic the Hedgehog, I loved all the games on the Genesis, and I just had so much fun with it. I even loved the 32X and the Sega Saturn, even though those are thought to be sort of disappointing systems in the grand scheme of things. I was always a fan of them. And even when it comes to handhelds, I did own a Game Boy, but I loved my Game Gear as well, even though it was a drain on the batteries. And everybody knows about the Sega Game Gear and of course the Sega Nomad, but did you know that Sega actually had one more handheld they released back in 1994? Not a lot of people know about it. I actually didn't really know about it until I saw one on eBay and I quickly bought it. It's called the Sega IR 7000. It's an interesting device. It's definitely not a traditional handheld gaming device, but it is cool. It is an interesting piece of gaming history and it is worth talking about. So I'm going to get my gaming historian on and tell you guys all about the Sega IR 7000.
1994 was an interesting year for Sega, as they had a lot on the table during this time frame. The Sega Genesis was still the main focal point of the company, with many great titles such as Beyond Oasis, Earthworm Jim, Sonic & Knuckles, and many more coming to the console during this time frame. You also had the Sega CD, which was plugging along for the CD market, with games like The Terminator and Shining Force CD releasing, with the traditional full motion video and CD quality audio. The 32X was also coming to store shelves as well, which would promise a 32-bit experience on the Genesis via an add-on, and featured games like Doom and Virtua Racing Deluxe. Sega also saw the rise of the Sega Channel, a TV service in which you could download and play games via your cable provider. The Sega Saturn also launched in the latter half of the year in Japan as well. Finally, the Sega Game Gear was still getting support with games and content, which was trying to get a piece of the handheld pie from Nintendo and the Game Boy. During this time, the rise of databank-style devices was starting to emerge, with Casio being the dominant brand in this division. Having a device that you could use as a calculator, a phone book, an event organizer, and more was often thought to be regulated to business types, but many younger people wanted in on this technological craze. Sega, who was known for trying unique things, decided to bring one more handheld to the market with the help of Casio in 1994 with the Sega IR 7000. Whereas the Game Gear was a dedicated gaming handheld, the Sega IR 7000 was far from that. It was a traditional databank-style device that offered a scheduler, a calendar, a calculator, currency converter, an alarm, a memo pad, a world map, phone contacts, and 10 different language settings. Aside from these mostly standard features, the Sega IR 7000 also allowed for you to create a picture of people in your contacts by using a variety of over 400 different facial features. Finally, the most interesting use of the Sega IR 7000 was the ability to send text messages from one device to another via an infrared sensor on the device. Sega marketed this feature of the Sega IR 7000 in their advertising, touting that you could talk to friends in class without making a sound. The Sega IR 7000 also featured one game called Brain Drain that could be played with either one or two players with two devices. As this wasn't a cartridge-based device, there was no way to add additional games to the unit. The Sega IR 7000 retailed for about $80, and it's not really known how long this device was kept in stores.
Now I do have two of the Sega IR 7000s, but unfortunately the screens do not seem to work on them for me. I don't know if it's an easy fix or whatnot. I tried new batteries, but I just couldn't get it to work. And that's a shame because it's an interesting piece of history. And that's all I really wanted to bring you guys, was just an interesting piece of history. Not a lot of people talk about these things, not a lot of people own these things, but it is a part of Sega's history, and Sega is one of the greatest gaming companies in my opinion. So let me know if you ever remember seeing one of these, or if you had a friend that had one, or if you yourself owned a Sega IR 7000 back in the day in the comments section down below. Thank you for checking this video out. As always, be sure to hit that like button, leave me your comments down below, check out other videos on the channel, subscribe if you're new here, and if you really like my face, check out my Patreon page. I'm gonna play around with this thing more, maybe I can get it to work. I'll catch you guys next time. Later.